the scream cut through the silence like a blade through ice. David Martin had only turned his back for a second, but in that second, the unimaginable happened. The frozen lake that had served as a winter playground for local kids suddenly cracked and swallowed his daughter's whole. He didn't think. He didn't breathe. He just ran. The icy wind howled as he leapt into the frigid water, his hands clawing through slush and shards of ice, calling their names again and again. The cold stole the feeling from his limbs, but he didn't stop. His daughters were in there, somewhere beneath that dark, bitter surface, and he would rather die than leave without them. 2 days earlier, David's world had already been on the edge of collapse. He was 36, a widower of 2 years, and father to 7-year-old twin girls, Lily and Ava. Since the tragic loss of his wife, Michelle, in a car accident, David had tried to keep everything together. He worked construction jobs when he could find them, delivered food at night, and still made time to cook breakfast, help with homework, and braid hair before school. He lived paycheck to paycheck in a cramped, one-bedroom rental in a small town in Minnesota. The heater barely worked. The fridge was usually half empty. And yet, David never once let his girls feel the weight of his struggle. They had no idea their favorite meals were made from whatever was on discount. They didn't know the bedtime stories were made up to distract them from cold nights without enough blankets. They only knew their daddy loved them more than anything in the world. On that fateful morning, he took them sledding near the edge of Meadow Lake. It had snowed all night, covering the ice with a beautiful but deceptive softness. Despite the signs warning of thin ice, other families were already nearby, and the girls begged to play a little closer to the frozen edge. David stayed alert, but it only took a moment. A distant crack. A splash. 2 screams. He dove in without hesitation. The water was agony. He couldn't see. He couldn't think. He felt like knives were piercing his skin, but the thought of his daughter's drowning kept him going. Somehow, by what could only be called a miracle, he reached Lily first, her hand just beneath the surface, and pulled her to the bank. Then he dove again, deeper this time, scraping his knuckles against unseen rocks and ice. He found Ava barely conscious, her coat snagged on something below. With strength he didn't know he had, he yanked her free and pushed her upward. Both girls were rushed to the hospital, unconscious but alive. Doctors said that if he had been even 30 seconds later, they wouldn't have made it. David's own hands were frostbitten. His body was battered. But he didn't care. His daughters were breathing. That was all that mattered. The local news picked up the story. "Hero Dad Saves Twin Girls from Frozen Death" was the headline. The story spread, mostly in small-town circles. A few people sent messages of support, some left small food packages at his door. David was grateful, but never expected more. He certainly didn't expect what happened next. For days after the rescue, the weather had cleared. David was at home, wrapping his blistered hands with bandages when he heard engines outside, several of them. He peeked through the window and saw 5 large, gleaming luxury SUVs pulling into the icy street in front of his house. At first, he thought it was some mistake. Maybe the wrong address. Maybe a wealthy family looking for a different neighborhood. Then the doors opened, and people began to step out. They weren't reporters or officials. They looked like ordinary people, some wore business suits, others jeans and jackets. One woman clutched a large binder. A man had a camera. Another carried a box with what looked like toys sticking out. One of them, a tall man with silver hair and a kind face, walked up and knocked on the door. "Mr. Martin," he asked gently. David opened the door, cautious but curious. "My name is Alan. I'm part of a group of business owners who saw the story about what you did for your daughters. We were deeply moved. Not just by the rescue, but by your life. Your fight. Your love for your kids. And, well, we wanted to do something about it." One by one, the others introduced themselves: restaurateurs, real estate developers, a toy store owner, even a retired nurse. They all had one thing in common: they had once struggled too. And now, they used their success to lift others who reminded them of themselves. They brought with them gifts, but more than that, opportunities. One handed David the keys to a gently used SUV. Reliable transportation, he said. Big enough for your girls. Safe. Another held out an envelope. Inside was a scholarship for both Lily and Ava, full tuition to any in-state university when they turned 18. The woman with the binder offered him a new job, full-time work at her construction firm with benefits, flexible hours, and a training program to help him move up. And finally, the group led him outside where, unbelievably, they handed him the deed to a modest but beautiful 3-bedroom home just a few blocks from the school. David stood there in stunned silence, tears welling in his eyes. He tried to speak, but the lump in his throat wouldn't budge. The girls, now recovered and bundled in their winter jackets, ran to his side. He knelt down, arms around them, sobbing into their shoulders. One of the women knelt beside him and whispered, "You gave everything to save them. Now let the world give something back to you." That night, David tucked his daughters into real beds, warm, soft, and safe. He looked around their new home and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: peace. It wasn't just the gifts. It was the reminder that good still existed. That kindness had not died in the chaos of the world. The story of David Martin became more than a headline. It became a movement. A reminder that the quiet strength of a parent's love can move hearts. That ordinary people can do extraordinary things. And that sometimes, the miracle you pray for doesn't come with lightning, it arrives in the sound of 5 engines pulling into your driveway.